Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So there's some significant changes happening in the world right now, and sometimes it's hard to make sense of because we have the looming collapse of the dollar. We have the COVID that we're dealing with, the ramifications of all of our loss of freedoms for that. We've got the Great Reset that seems to be brewing, central bank digital currency. Where does it all fit in? How does it all fit together? And so joining me today are two very interesting and unique individuals. So Dr. Kirk Elliott, who I know that you're probably familiar with because I have him on all the time, who's a double doctor. He's got a PhD in theology and economics, which I think is perfect, but also Bo Polny, someone who's also an expert in biblical prophecy, but also an expert in the precious metals markets and the global financial markets. And so we're going to be talking about just what we're experiencing right now. Is this the end of an empire? Is it a collapse of a system? Is it the beginning of something new? What's the future look like? So this is going to be a really fascinating interview. I hope that you really enjoy it. Before we get started, make sure you're following me on social media at Man in America. And also every show is done as a podcast as well. So if you'd rather listen, just open up your favorite podcast app and search for Man in America and you will find me there. All right, folks, let's jump into this interview with Bo Polny and Dr. Kirk Elliott. All right, so Bo and Kirk, it is such a pleasure to have both of you today because I think that if we look around with what's happening in the world, it really feels like it's hinging upon the culmination of something spiritual happening and something financial happening, and how they're very tied. Because I think that for a lot of people that are waking up to what's happening, there's a realization that we've been enslaved. There are evil people that are controlling us in many ways. They control the banks, they control the media, et cetera. But it's this understanding that their mechanism of control is the same thing of the money changers. It's that control of the money system. So anyway, I thank both of you for being here. This is going to be a really interesting conversation that we're going to be diving into. And I think both of you have a wealth of knowledge of information, both from the spiritual realm and the financial realm. This is, I think, going to be a great blend. So again, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So the audience knows Kirk extremely well, but Bo, can you give us just the elevator pitch introduction to yourself so our audience really knows who you are?
The best title was given to me through prophetic word was The Analyst of Time. And what I really do in a nutshell is I study biblical timelines of history. If you study history, you'll have a glimpse into the future of what may or, more so when things could happen. And that's precisely what I do. I study biblical timelines of history. I've been able to layer those into the present day, and the accuracy of some of the things that we've been said on certain dates has been mind blowing. So people can kind of all over the world like to listen to some of the important time windows that we speak of or that I speak of, and all of it's biblical. So again, I don't want the glory for what I'm doing, but I do want you to know that, Israel was a covenant nation. So was the United States. The times of old are now happening in the times of present. And that's the best way to describe it. And so we're going to talk about how critically important some of these next, few months are.
Well, I want to start with pulling up an article from Zero Hedge. Right, here we go. That I think really helps set the discussion up. And this came out within this past week. USD, the king is dead. Long live the king. And it's talking about how is the dollar losing its status as the king of currencies. And even this cool graphic here of the king, King George, right, of the United States. But I think that it's significant because if you look at what the dollar represents, it's not just the collapse of a currency like the Venezuelan currency or Zimbabwe, et cetera, but what role the US dollar has had in the orchestration and control of us from a lot of these evil people that we're now waking up to. So, Bo, before we started recording, you started explaining this, which I think is mind-blowing. So I had asked you, I said, look, and I was actually talking to both of you saying, gentlemen, I really feel like that where we're at right now in history is not just the end of a currency or the collapse of a currency, but really the end of an empire. But I also don't, I want people to understand, and they'll get it from this conversation, is that the end is also the beginning, right? So the end is not the end where everything disappears and it's just hell and brimstone and we're all dead, right? Like, in my opinion, the end, there's ends, but there's also beginnings. And if you're sick and your illness ends and your health begins, right? Like, that's okay. It's a good thing, right? So sometimes the end of things are good. So, Bo, from your perspective and your analysis on the wheel of history, where are we at right now? Because it feels like we're going through this insane, wild ride.
Well, you actually nailed it right on what you're saying. As one dies, the best word I can add to what you just said, Seth, is another is born. You see, so what we're stepping into is the death of an empire and the birth of a new. And so everything that we are witnessing right in front of us, as crazy, as wild, as maybe scary or upsetting as a lot of it is, this is what was written thousands of years ago. I know people find this hard to believe, but we are living and watching an incredible point in time that's about to manifest right in front of us. You know, Matthew, scripturally, is Matthew 24. And this will help the viewers kind of understand, but if your staff could be so kind, maybe drop on page 20. Matthew 24 says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. These are the beginnings of birth pains." Now, as you're on that slide, I'd like you to step over to the next slide. If you can click on page 25, page 12. Page 12. Page 12 is so important to understand, because if you go to page 12, you're going to see that nothing we're witnessing is random. In fact, it's absolute perfection by the hand of God. What I'm saying is, those who know biblical prophecy have read the story of Daniel. The story of Daniel is truly an incredible story, because King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He refuses to tell his soothsayers, his prophets, his wise men, any of the dream, but he tells them, if you don't give me the interpretation by morning, you're all dead. What's the point of having you if you can't interpret my dream? And they answer, King, no one's done this. It's impossible to give you an interpretation if we don't know your dream. Yet Daniel goes into prayer. God reveals the dream to him, and in the morning he steps forward. Not only does he interpret the dream to absolute perfection of what Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, but yet never told anybody. The dream predicted and foretold the next 2,500 years. It predicted Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the papacy, the United States. And what we're stepping into is the last piece of this puzzle. So you talk about an empire. There is your empire, Seth, right in front of you. It's called Babylon then. Today, it's Mystery Babylon, if you want to click on page 6. There is your Mystery Babylon, as written in Revelation 17, verse 5. It's the Klaus Schwabs, the Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Freemasons. They've built up a financial system of money created out of thin air. They've enslaved everything from the church, the family, the education system, the government, the entertainment, the media. They've done it all with what? The money. And no different than the money changers of old. Because what is saying the Bible? Money, the love of money. These people love money because they know if you have money, you can buy and pay off everybody. The love of money is the root of all evil. And so the Mystery Babylon it's the harlot, it's the deep state that works in the shadows. That's why it's written as a mystery in the Bible, right? They work in the shadows and they pull strings of world leaders to control the 7 mountains, which I just described. They are the puppet masters. So if you go to page 13, back to next to 13, so we talked about Mystery Babylon. So the fall, there's Babylon, Mystery Babylon, present day. So we are about to witness, when you read Daniel 2, verse 34, and it says, while you were watching. So Seth and Dr. Kirk, we're going to watch this. right in front of us. While you are watching, a stone carved out by no human hand, meaning God is going to do this. No man is going to be involved. What's about to happen, the world will know that God intervened. And that statue of Babylon's about to come down and fall, fulfilling 2,500 years. And then that takes us back to what I said earlier. It takes us back to a birth of what we had on page 20. So as this empire falls, a new is born. But this new is what? Is the birth of God's kingdom. Because if you read Daniel 2, verse 34, this kingdom, as Babylon falls, the new kingdom that rises will last forever. And it's going to be built on truth and honesty. So what is gold and silver? It's an honest ledger of money. What have they done? They've used fake money to enslave humanity. And so if you can scroll one last slide, and then you can take it from here. But page 46, this is how they did it. And then Kirk can expand on this as well, too. Dr. Elliott can expand here. But on page 46, look at what they did. Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71. You can see that right there. After he took us off the gold standard, look what happened to the money supply. You know, Dr. Elliott can explain about this, okay? But when you expand the money supply, they're creating it out of thin air. And that's why a home in the 70s was worth $30,000. Now that same home is worth $1 million. Just because the money supply, look what they did. This was only going into 2020. The money supply is intense. It's insane right now. And that's why everything is priced insane, because they took us off the gold standard. So that allows them to create money out of thin air to infinity. And that is what they've done. And then this is where it comes biblical, because Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71. It became the petrodollar in 1973. Now, if you add 50 years to 1973, guess what year you land at? 2023. Last slide, page 41. Sorry, I'm going to get one last slide and go from here. But you'll understand why 2023 is so important, because it's very clear. This is biblical. And you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all of its inhabitants. So we're about to witness God intervene, destroy the money system. He's going to get the glory. The money changers are about to be stopped in their tracks. And gold and silver are going to do an absolute moonshot, one you can never even imagine. And Dr. Elliott, who sells gold and silver, is soon going to be shut down for a period of time, because Dr. Elliott will not know what to sell gold for or silver. He won't know what his vendors are going to sell it back to him for. It's just going to be no offer, because no one's going to know what the value of it is, because it's just going to go crazy when this moment in time happens. And biblically, when God intervenes and does things, it literally takes one day. So go from here.
Well, Kirk, I'll pass it over to you now.
Well, so this is really interesting, and I love when Bo talks like that, because it's so cool to me when you can actually map finance with scriptural references, right? And the pieces all start to fit into place. So that article that you brought up, Seth, the king is dead. It's not the king of kings that's dead. It's the king dollar as the world's reserve.
The worldly king.
So I don't want anybody.
Actually, it's the Federal Reserve Note, which is not federal, which is not a reserve. It's a private institution. Continue.
Yeah. So I don't want people to get gripped and paralyzed with fear after this conversation, because the king of kings is not dead, right? So if you go back to the 1940s, the Bretton Woods Act in July of 1944, it pegged basically international settlements in basically the basis for the US dollar and gold. For all international settlements, there's pegged to the US dollar's value. See, that Bretton Woods system effectively came to an end in the early 1970s, which what Bo was talking about when Nixon actually announced that the U.S. would no longer exchange gold for U.S. currency. Then in 73, we changed from this quasi-gold-backed sort of currency, right, whereas other currencies are pegged to gold, to a petro-based dollar, right? Still the reserve currency of the world. So this is what has amounted to us being able to amass tens of trillions of dollars, up, $32 trillion worth of debt over since the beginning of time here as a country, and people still wanted our currency. So by default, then other countries, other people from other nations basically forget that. They forget that we have to print more money than what we need domestically to fund international settlements. And we start to see what we're seeing today. It's like, hey, America, you're squandering your time in the sun. You printed way too much dollars. You're flooding the markets with it. Well, if I were a US policymaker, I'd push back just a little bit and say, well, for crying out loud, we have to print more dollars than what we need domestically to fund all international settlements. That's what the world's reserve currency does. But throughout time, the reserve currency of the world has lasted in a range from like 45 years to about 105 years. Well, 1944 is the basis when we became the world's reserve currency under Bretton Woods. We're 80 plus years into this experiment. So we just happen to be, or maybe not just happen to be, if because Bo's timeline goes back so even longer than that, right? Is we just happen to be the generation that's alive when our reserve currency status fails. So that's what this article is about. But for something that's been around for almost 90 years, right, to actually go away, you have to kill something, right? It's not like you can just say the BRICS nations are coming and said, we want to be the world's reserve currency now. Goodbye, US dollar. Doesn't happen that easy, right? So you have to dismantle what once was to bring in something new. That's what this article is all about. So what does this article say? That the king is dead. So we've been the king of currencies. Dollar hegemony refers to the dominance of the United States dollar as the world's primary reserve currency since the end of World War II. So this has given us enormous, like big economic and political power. See, we've been able to print money or borrow at low interest rates, well, for as long as I can remember, right? But really this goes back to especially right after 9/11, when they tried to stimulate the economy with these artificially low rates. And then that was amplified in 2009, when that crisis, basically free money, cheaper than free money, because the interest rates was less than inflation, right? So we're doing this, and this basically allowed us to create tens of trillions of dollars worth of debt. Now the rest of the world says, nope, done. And that enabled us to finance our large trade deficits and military spending, which were central to our expansion and power. However, these days of global trade dominance are about done. If we look back to 2022, right? So countries are now no longer really trading as much in US dollars. They're taking that international agreement and thumbing their nose at it, because how can I tell? Don't take my word for it. Let's just look. Let's just look at the numbers, right? So China and Russia bilateral trade in 2022 increased 34% to 190 billion. China-Brazil bilateral trade hit a record of 150 billion. China-India bilateral trade hit 135 billion. These are all hundreds of billions that are no longer done in US dollars, right? So it's like, okay, now let's look at the reduced confidence in the US economy. So another factor contributing to the decline of the dollar is reduced confidence since 2008, 2009. See, this has led to a shift in other alternative currencies, such as the euro, such as the Chinese yuan, as people seek to diversify into stable, more diverse assets. Well, now add into that cryptocurrencies, add into that the BRICS nations that are wanting to back their currency with gold and say, hey, US dollar, off with your head. We want to be the world's reserve currency. And they now have this weird opportunity in the history of our country where they could make this happen, because they see a vacuum, a void in leadership in our country, right? They're looking at President Biden in like a video that I saw from October, but it's very appropriate for today, where he's sitting there at an ice cream shop being interviewed, and he's licking this ice cream cone and like lick, and he's just like chowing down on this thing. And what was the question? Are you concerned about the demise of the US dollar? He said, no, I'm concerned about the demise of the global economy. It's like, wait, what president are you the country of, for crying out loud, right? So So if I were China, if I were Putin, I'd be hearing comments like that. It's like, ooh, now's our time to strike, because they're not going to do anything. He's not going to do anything. He's more concerned about the world. Well, again, don't take my word for it. What his action since then basically said? He's giving billions and billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine to fund their pension program, not looking at U.S. people. They could care less about our retirements. He's giving all this foreign aid to Ukraine to fund their pensions. So then you've got other economic considerations. You've got these U.S. sanctions and geopolitical tensions. Basically, the U.S. has used that reserve currency status basically to pose or force economic sanctions on countries that it disagrees with, Iran, Russia, and so forth. So what does that mean? It means they're just going to get ticked. They're going to say, fine, we'll find somebody else to trade with, right? Which is what happened when we put a $60 cap on Russian oil, the G7 nations. What did they do? This started the mass bloodbath of countries leaving the US dollar as the petrodollar and starting these bilateral trade agreements. Brazil with China, India with Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, good grief, those two aligning with Russia when they hate each other, and they've hated each other since the beginning of time. Japan leaving the G7 nations basically in the dust and saying, we're going to actually not abide by this accord, and we're going to basically, buy oil from Russia, which is a BRICS nation. So that basically puts them in alignment with China. Japan and China, friends? Are you joking me? Right? So you've got all of this movement away from the US dollar. And how do they do that? Dismantle the faith and confidence in the US dollar by eroding its petrodollar status, which causes us to inflate the currency like there's no tomorrow. They have to raise rates to slow down inflation, but that's not enough. They also have to dismantle people's faith and basically confidence in the US banking system. Because if you erode confidence in the US economy and confidence in the banking system, they can usher in what they want, which is this new system, the central bank digital currency system, which is all about removing the control of our own finances from our lives, our ability to buy and sell. To do that, you needed to dismantle what once was, which was the US dollar as the reserve currency status, change it to something new. That's the birth of a new world's reserve currency and the death of us being that king. That's what that article that you mentioned was all about. And that basically corroborates everything that Bo just said.
Yeah, it all comes to, it all comes together. And so, and this is why I want to, oh, go ahead, Bo. Yes.
Well, I can add to what you're saying on a little twist, Kirk, because see, they're pushing what you described and what maybe the article is describing is the birth of the Great Reset. So that's what they're pushing for, because the Great Reset will be directly related and tied in with a central bank digital currency. Okay. So I would agree on how you described all that. But biblically, they're polar opposites. When Babylon comes down, the central bank digital currency, the bankers, the present day bankers get destroyed. And so we're about to witness their system of banking. They're planning on one thing, but they're going to get another. See, when an example would be what happened at the Red Sea. Pharaoh's coming in to kill Israel. And this is a very easy to understand. Israel thought they were dead. Pharaoh had all the might and power. He's going to kill all of Israel because they're pinned up against the Red Sea. And so if Pharaoh had his way, Israel would be dead, and we soon enough are going to be entrenched with a central bank digital currency, and the Great Reset is alive. But when God intervenes, stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord, for he will work for you today. Their plans are about to be destroyed. God's going to close the sea on them. They are going to be destroyed. Along with their plans and the central bank digital currency, and God's kingdom will be birthed as Babylon falls. See, so we're heading into an absolute clash of the titans, because this is literally going to be evil challenging, what you're doing right now, evil's challenging God, but literally evil's literally playing into the plans of God. Because God's already written the story thousands of years ago, and they are about to be destroyed by the hand of God. And this is supposed to go down before the summer solstice of June 21. Potentially in the month of May is going to be sheer mayhem in the financial markets. So whatever they're planning is going to be flipped upside down by the hand of God, and they lose. So it's really incredible and awesome where we're at right now.
And this is what's lovely about this discussion, is that there's excitement. And this is where I'm at too. It's like, if we've lived under this for so long, since before we were born, since before my parents and grandparents and great grandparents, we've lived under this system for almost as old as time, right? This corrupt system. And so, reframing it from the perspective of, well, is what's happening right now, as we talked about, that their system, and really the fiat currency known as the US dollar, obviously that hasn't been around for 6,000 years, but that is just that's the manifestation of the pinnacle of their mastery of Babylonian money magic, right? Is the US dollar. Yes. Like it's the pinnacle that they've used in this final period that they have. Well, I think they know they have a window where they have to accelerate their plan. They have to get in control before God steps in. And so I think they're also scrambling. And so even though it feels like this will be tumultuous, because I think it will, right? It will absolutely be tumultuous. Absolutely. But there's a silver lining or a golden lining that's beyond even our imagination. And so, and this is why I'd love to hear, especially Bo, your thoughts as you're looking at the cycles and everything, kind of looking and peering into the future. Like, for instance, with my perspective and where I'm at in life, we've got a mortgage, right? So I still owe a couple $100,000 to a bank for a mortgage. And so part of the thinking is like,
which is a death grip by definition.
Oh yes, yeah, mortgage, mortuary mortgage. So, but the question is like, even for this, okay, so you're saying that silver and gold will basically go moonshot, which I want to hear what that looks like. I'm really curious, but in that, I guess that's a different question, but it's like, even like right now I'm thinking, okay, well, do I say I have an extra $1,000 in a month, right? Do I put that towards paying off the mortgage even further, or do I put that into silver? Because this is actually a common question people are asking. Like, should I pay down my mortgage extra with the extra money, or should I put that money into silver as an example? So, how do you see this system changing? Because from one perspective, I look at it, I know that they have intentionally suppressed the value of silver and gold like extensively, through the paper markets and everything. They've kept the value at like stupid lows, right? But it's also, it's using their system, their fiat currency is also, so it's like, if that system falls, I believe it's natural that the precious metals will go to their rightful place, because they're real money. Like, in my opinion, they're God's money. They're the elements, they're on the periodic table, right? They've been.
It's not even it's not in your opinion. It's biblical. Haggai 2 verse 8, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. Continue, please.
Well, anyway, yeah. So I guess, what does this next stage look like? Like, for people that are watching and they've been following along and they know Klaus Schwab and Harari and they're biting their nails and saying, okay, this is, central bank digital currency and all this. Like, what's it look like the course of the next couple of years?
That's a good question. So let's get into some of this. So you use the word accelerate, and I like that word that you used. Everything's accelerating. See, you're right. They are accelerating time to bring in what their plan is. And what is their plan? Okay, no different than what Hitler tried to do but failed. Okay, so they're trying to bring, and then you had what's his name, the President Bush, talk about the one world order. So they are trying to bring on a one world government, okay? And this is biblical. It's in the Bible. None of this is made up, okay? And we're watching biblical timelines unfold in front of us. But they accelerated time. You're correct, Seth. And so they came early. And so God's about to give them what's written in the Bible called the mortal wound. The mortal wound if you want to click on that page, it would be page 18. The mortal wound, I believe, in my opinion, would be what's about to happen to the US dollar. So the dollar is going to get the head wound, which basically is going to cause it to collapse. And this will be the fall of the US dollar. And also, it'll fulfill the prophetic word of Kim Clement, the brothers of Goliath, which are the BRICS nations, which Dr. Elliott was referencing earlier. So the BRICS nations are going to come together as one and destroy the US dollar as the world reserve currency. It'll lose its status as the world's reserve currency. So if you want to look more in time, because to me, it's so important to study time. If you study time, you'll understand what's coming. And so if we go to page 34, some beautiful examples of why time is so important, because believe it or not, 400 years ago to the mark, the Mayflower landed. Well, do you know how long Israel was in bondage to Pharaoh? 400 years. This is not a coincidence. Nothing's by coincidence. There's no such word as coincidence. It's all by design, because when it's by design, they just happen to be coincidences. So 400 years go by after Mayflower, and boom, next thing you know, 2020 hits, and you got the word corona. And it's a worldwide phenomenon that goes around the entire world. Page 28. And so this is what happened when corona hit. Page 28. First seal of Revelation opened. We are in end times. We are in the beginning of end times, not in any kind of tribulation. So don't expect Jesus to show up tomorrow, okay? Not happening. We're setting the stage, no different than what John the Baptist was in the wilderness. Like, what are you doing, Dr. Elliott? Buy gold and silver. Why? Because it's God's money, right? It's the real thing. What are you doing, Seth? You're out there, preaching the word. Be aware of what's going on. It's crazy going on. They're printing money out of thin air. You're doing nothing but preparing the way for the birth of a new. So when Jesus Christ showed up, he was the new. It's called a jubilee. And so when Revelation started with Corona, that was seal 1. Then just a few months later, 5 months later, seal 2 opens up. And that was peace taken from the earth. Happened on a feast. So first seal opened on Hanukkah, a feast. Next feast was Pentecost. Second seal opened on that exact day. The George Floyd riots break out, and next thing you know, all over the world, you got these rioting in all over the different countries, literally on that weekend, and it hasn't stopped since. Then you got the Ukraine war breakout. All of this is biblical, what's going on. And so now we are at 2023, the year of Jubilee. And the year of Jubilee is what we just read, Leviticus. Thou shalt consecrate the 50th year. So we are third horsemen of Revelation. So that would take us to what's about to manifest on page 38 is the horseman of Revelation. So page 38 is a black horse. And whether people want to believe or not, everything you know in your heart, deep down, our world changed when Corona hit the scene. You know for a fact our world has changed forever since Corona came on the scene, and it is written, when the first seal of Revelation opens, the world will never be the same. Tell me that word is wrong, because it's exactly what happened. And so the third horseman of Revelation is the great financial reset, is the greatest financial event in human history. Why? Because God intervenes and just flips the tables on the money changers. The same thing that happened in the temple. That's why the rider's got scales in his hands. The scales represent financial scales. The rider is sitting on a black horse. This is crazy. This part is crazy, Seth. Okay? Why? Because the black horse, I believe, represents the angel of death that visited Pharaoh at the end of the 400 years. So what happened to the angel of death? The angel of death showed up, passed over Goshen, but killed the firstborn of all of Egypt. We are expected, and potentially this month, are expected, I believe, can and might witness the angel of death that visited Pharaoh and is going to kill large amounts of people, evil ones, because it passed over Goshen. He's going to strike, and we're going to see this month potentially still. I believe we are going to see this month, April, a godly intervention. And I believe it will be directly related to the angel of death. And this was prophesied. Next, page 39. The angel of death is on the earth right now. He's on the earth. So if he strikes, it's supposed to be potentially this month. So something crazy is at the cusp here. We haven't seen it happen yet, but I do want to be crystal clear. All of this went down at a time of Israel and Egypt at Passover. And we are in the Passover season right here, right now. Go ahead, Seth.
Well, so one question I had, and this is just more, I guess you could say curiosity, but I have my own, kind of selfish intentions in it, but really just kind of thinking, in your opinion, when this flip happens, right, when those scales get reversed and the world returns back to true money, right now we're seeing silver and gold already at record highs. They're kind of right there at 2050, kind of bumping up and down above 2000 for gold, $25, $26 for silver. But when all this change happens, where do you see them going? What do you think? I know this is a hard question to ask, but you're someone that kind of ponders these things. I think it's worth asking. So say a couple of years from now, what do you think silver could be worth? What could gold be worth?
That's a great question. Actually, if you can please click on page 46, go back to page 46, we'll look at the money supply and what they've done with it. So on page 46, what you've seen is Nixon takes us off the gold standard in 71, right? So it took, I think it was 100 years or 50 years, whatever it was, just to get to a $500 billion. Okay. And then Nixon takes us off the gold standard. We're in the quadrillions now. Okay. So the money supply is ginormous. That's even a word, but it's off the chart. So this is only to year 2020. Okay. So it's kind of an easy answer to give you, because when Nixon took us off the gold standard, look at the money supply. So a home that was worth $30,000 becomes worth $1 million just because of the money supply. Okay. So how can this play out? Well, Haggai 2 verse 8, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. He's going to flip the scales. What happened in, I think it was the early 80s, when gold went up to $850, what it did was it met the money supply. And that's why, and silver was at $50 at the time. So they all met the money supply. So if you look on page 48, what you'll see is the money supply. We're in the quadrillions of dollars, and it's all pivoting on gold and silver. So when the financial system flips, this whole thing's going to fall over, and the only thing left standing is gold and silver. And so that takes us back to page 46. If you look at that chart again, it's going to come back to where it was in 1970. So if you look at real estate as an example, go to page 47. There's a new slide I just put together this morning. You're looking at potential real estate collapse of anywhere as down to 90% in the next couple of years. And so those that hold gold and silver are going to take a bar of silver and go pick up a house. So what is it going to be worth? It really doesn't matter, because it's going to be so enormous in terms of what you can get for it is what you can buy for it, right? But I can just give you some easy numbers. If you look at Matthew in the Bible, it talks about blessings being 30, 60, 100-fold, right? So if you just take, $20 as an example, times 30, so that's $600 silver, and that's just the first level. Then you're talking $1,500, then or $1,200, then you're talking $2,000 to $25, and that's just a $2,000 spot. And Dr. Ellie can expand upon, what spread is, right? Because if silver's trading at $2,000 an ounce, you're not buying it for $2,000. You're probably paying $3,000 just to get it in your hand because of what's called a spread. The spreads right now, silver's at $25, but an eagle's $40 to $45 for an eagle. Okay, so what's going to happen is it's going to become so priceless that people who invested right now who were wise will be able to take these precious metals and for maybe 2-3 ounces of silver, go pick up a car that's worth today $50,000. For a block of silver, get some land. And so it doesn't really matter the price, because people they will do anything and everything to get their hands on something you can't get. See, Dr. Elliott will not be able to really source large amounts of silver at some point in the very near future, because all you need is, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 or 2 billionaires step up to the plate and everything's sold out. Am I wrong? Right? So that's what's about to happen. So the prices are going to be incredibly high, but not only that, it's a double win, because the prices of precious metals will be incredibly high, but everything else will be priced back to where it should be by end of next year, right? So you'll be able to buy things that blow your mind.
Actually, I have a quick story that there's someone that I was interviewing recently that told a story of, it was a bellhop at a hotel, and perhaps you both have heard this story, and I might butcher it a little bit, but it was a bellhop at a hotel out in California, I believe. And the hotel was, I think, a 3 or 4 story building in California. And this was before the Great Depression hit. A wealthy client of the hotel gave him a tip and gave him a gold coin as a tip. After the Great Depression hit, and after the bank runs, everything completely collapsed, 2 things happened. One was the value of the gold went up, but also because of, it was a major commodity that people were seeking after, but also the value of that real estate collapsed. So you had this double whammy. So the story is that he was given this coin. He was a poor bellhop. He held on to it. After the Great Depression, he went back and he bought that hotel with that coin. Right? Like there's also, so he also mentioned there's a famous picture, I think it was Cliff High talking about this, of it was after the Depression, and there's I think it might have been a Rolls Royce, I think it was a Rolls Royce, one of the really high-end cars in New York City, and there's 2 guys sitting by the hood of it with a stack of silver coins or gold coins on the hood of the car. Maybe it was silver coins, I think. But anyway, and there's a huge crowd. And basically what happened is after the Great Depression, this guy traded a stack of coins for a Rolls Royce because everything had inverted, which is just kind of crazy to think about. So Kirk, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, when Bo says that you're going to have a hard time even transacting because it's going to be going parabolic, I mean, what do you think?
Well, we will. However, higher prices always shake out inventory too, right? So the price could go up to $75, $100, $200, $500 an ounce, right? It's like these billionaires are gobble it up and they're making all this money, but other people who have had it, they will release that into the system. So there could be some, but the point is, don't wait till then to buy it. Right? That's silly. I would rather be 3 months, 9 months, a year early than 1 day late, always, right? Because you're already seeing these premiums expand. I wouldn't buy a Silver Eagle for all the tea in China. Really, I wouldn't. Which is why we do, because the premiums are too high, even now, right? But bullion, you can get 1 ounce rounds, 10 ounce bars, 100 ounce bars in the $28 to $29 range, with silver being in the 25. So that's why I love that stuff. But some of the stuff, the premium's already expanding, and we're not even really at the beginning to the middle stages of this yet. When you start to see that acceleration, it's going to go so quick. I mean, we saw this happen to a small extent in 2011. Silver went from like $12 an ounce to $50 an ounce over that summer and fall. I mean, that was wild, right? But imagine the change of a currency system, which this is where there's huge opportunity in all of this, and why all of us believers should have a smile on our face, because what Bo said is true. They're going to be ushering in the central bank digital currency, right? But what lasts, we don't have a choice whether that's coming. It is coming, right? What we have a choice with is whether we want to keep it or not, right? This is where people will rise up and they'll say, oh, there's other options. There's going to be a gold-backed currency. There's going to be silver for barter. There's going to be something else, right? Or maybe a cryptocurrency rises up to replace central bank digital currency, because every evangelical and Catholic in the world is going to say, this is the mark of the beast, not playing. And every libertarian on the planet is going to say, loss of freedom, loss of privacy, I'm not playing, right? So what they meant for destruction, God can mean for good as we usher in something new. And he will always provide us a way to thrive in the midst of the storm. This is what the the story of the Sea of Galilee is all about, right? It's like seeing the storm around you. You don't get so scared that you sink, right? Focus on the solution, focus on Jesus, and watch what starts to happen. And Peter was walking on water for a bit till he started to focus on the storm, right? Focus on the solution, because as all of this starts to unwind and unravel on our lives, God will show us a way to actually, he's going to manifest himself really big and large and in charge, like he is already, but people aren't seeing it because they're blinded. They've got these spiritual blinders on. But when push comes to shove and it gets really nasty, they will see, oh my word, there is a solution. There always has been one. We just have to identify it and act accordingly, right? This is where that faith meets finance, meets politics, meets economics, and they all blend into one eventually. And this is why I am excited, because you are not going to want to buy silver when it's $500,000, $2,000 an ounce. You'd have rather bought it when it's 25 or 50 or even 100, right? And at some point, it's not going to matter. Just do it prior to everything falling apart rather than a day after.
And so here's a question for Bo. What do you think happens to the banking system? So for instance, I've got an account with JP Morgan Chase. I've all but closed it because I don't want to support those businesses. It's got a couple $100 in there because I've got a credit card through them, right? But let's take a step back and look at Wells Fargo, who has a bunch of home mortgages, right? So these are all companies that are built on the Babylonian money magic system, right? They're built on the money changer system. So do you think that all of these banks will collapse? What do you think will happen to mortgages or debts? So I've got a mortgage on my house, and I'm not saying, hey, I'll stop paying it because I'm going to keep paying it because I want them to take it. But what do you think happens to the banking system and all the loans that they're holding?
What I can clearly say is this. When you look at the world that was built on money magic, if we talked earlier about, the chart when Nixon took us off the gold standard and they went parabolic, right? All of that is your mortgages, right? So if you click back on page 46, gives your viewers a visual. 46, there's your money magic. When you look at the money supply, right? When they create that whole massive parabolic move, your mortgage, Seth, is tied in with that, okay? Your credit cards, all the world's credit cards, everyone's mortgages, there's the bond, everything's in there. So my question back to you, because, the true answer, we know within ourselves, right? If this thing resets, it collapses, and it goes back to where it should be back in 70 when they actually had a gold standard. Because I'm as crazy as this is, when this system comes down, it's going to be a massive mess. Okay, you have to this is a worldwide quadrillion-dollar financial system that's about to blow up. This is going to be a worldwide mess, but it's an organized mess. Because why? It's by the hand of God. This is biblically the third seal of Revelation. God's in charge of this and in control of this. This is the fall of the Babylonian money system and then the birth of a new. So we are actually going to have a return to the gold standard. So Dr. Elliott will be selling and buying and helping people out with gold transactions in the future. The only challenge is going to be is that maybe sourcing a lot of gold in the future, because a lot of people, a lot of big people have come in and bought it all up, and people were selling or buying, and so he's going to be constantly transacting. But he's right, if you don't get it before all this happens, to come in and buy large amounts later on is going to be very difficult, or the pricing is going to be insanely expensive because everything's changed. It's like if you sat on the fence waiting for this thing to happen to see if Seth and Kirk Elliott and Bo are right, you actually sat on the fence, you missed the boat, because when this thing happens, we're talking high-speed computers, this thing's game over. I haven't listened to Cliff in probably a couple of years, but I do know that one thing he said 2 or 3 years ago, he said, and this was interesting. He said that when this event goes down, silver is going to go limit up 3 times in a single day and then $20. So that would take it to about $70 in a single day. So it's going to go from where it is right now to about $70 in a single day. And I don't know whatever happens after that. But that all I know, that makes a heck of a lot of sense, because that basically will cause a huge problem for Dr. Elliott to know what to sell it for if silver is going up every single minute in terms of price. So where do you lock in the price to sell something to somebody, right? And then it's like, next thing you know, well, if he's got to replenish his inventory. Well, if the prices went from 25 to $70 in a matter of like an hour or something, right? Who's gonna? He doesn't know who's gonna, the vendors, what they're gonna sell it to him for, So everything's just gonna go like big question mark, and that's called no offer, because no one knows what to do. And so what ends up happening is that it's going to cause the financial system ultimately to crumble and collapse. And silver is by definition a bank killer. It's called a silver bullet. There's stories about silver and what it does to, when you shoot a werewolf or something with it, right? But the point is that, when it starts going up, it's going to literally destroy, because all they've done with silver is there's one bank A and bank B. So one month, the bank A has got billions of dollars, a trillion, they sell to bank B. Then the bank B next month sells back to, this is what they've been doing, okay, for decades. But next thing you know, if they lose control of the price, both bank A and B are bankrupt. They're the ones holding your mortgages. And what if you go back, all I can do is study history. What happened with Pharaoh? Pharaoh, unwillingly but forced to by the angel of death, let Israel go, and they left with the gold and silver at Passover, which we're in now. So we're about to witness the great wealth transfer begin potentially this month. This month, April 8th, wealth transfer is supposed to begin. And that leads us into May, the great miracle, the Red Sea miracle, where Pharaoh ultimately is destroyed by the hand of God, because only God opened the sea and only God closed the sea on Pharaoh's head. And Pharaoh played into God's plan. Get it? He went into the Red Sea and he played into God's plan. God was just watching him play into his plan. And then he's going to wipe out the entire chessboard, and it's game over May into June. So the banking system we know collapses May into June, correlating with the Red Sea miracle, which is supposed to be in the month of May. And so what happened historically? The chains were off of Israel. Your mortgage, your death grip, the chains will come off of you, and you no longer have a death grip. So how it plays out, I don't know. God knows. It's his secret. But I tell you, as we come into the fullness of time, the end of June, the death grip on you will be released, and you will no longer have a death grip on you, a mortgage. That's all I know, because if you read Leviticus, it's a 50-year jubilee. If you read Genesis, 400 years, look what happened to Pharaoh. All I'm saying is, at the Red Sea, it wasn't Moses that parted it. It wasn't Israel. Moses said, "Stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord, for he will work for you today." So something biblical is about to happen. The game plan. April, potential angel of death. Financial mess in May, leading to full exposure and everything, truths coming out as we head into the end of June, summer solstice. That takes us into a massive shift in our world as we head into this summertime. And then the fulfillment of Kim Clement's words, the fall, because we're going to need at some point the builder 45 to come back and rebuild after the mess. And that's why, back to the beginning of the show, Biden's in right now, because the collapse of the dollar is going to be on the Biden watch. It will, because Trump is, as much as people want to believe or not, David did some amazing things and some crazy, horrible things, but ultimately, David loved God. Study history, okay? The point is, Trump is no different than David. But he's in flesh. He's flawed like we all are. But he's God's anointed to come back and rebuild a financial system that God just destroyed. God's about to destroy the financial system. The world will know God did it. When the financial system collapses, you're going to need the builder to come back and rebuild a multi-trillion-dollar financial system. He's going to go back and back some kind of maybe a treasury, something, because remember, I do believe that the treasury is not the Federal Reserve doesn't have access to the gold in the Treasury, so it's going to potentially come back and maybe rebuild some maybe a Treasury instrument or something. But bottom line is he's going to restore gold as money in the United States before year end, and that will. And those that are holding, who've bought precious metals from Kirk, for example, from Dr. Elliott, or any who are holding gold and silver today in their hand, are already involved in the new monetary system. They just don't know it. But it's going to come back to where it was in the 70s. You'll be able to buy things incredible. So two things, another double win. That's how God operates, right? The mortgages are going to be the release from bondage and the blessing. So there's a release from bondage, and then there's blessings. The blessings are going to be the multiplication of God's money. So those mortgages get released. So that's the release from bondage from pharaohs, present day pharaohs. And then the blessings come when God multiplies his money. So those who prepared with gold and silver are going to be enormously blessed in the future. And they're going to have so many blessings, because many people, I get so many comments like, yeah, but I live check to check and I can't afford to buy silver, even silver. Forget about gold, right? But here's the thing about God. He's a multiplier. And those that prepared are going to be so blessed financially that they will be able to bless, because of the expansion of the prices of precious metals, they'll be able to bless all of those around them. So it's a double win. It's a release from bondage for the mortgages, because that's what that is. And secondly, blessings follow. Enormous blessings follow. So I hope I've answered your questions on the mortgages.
Yeah, you have very much so. And so we're ending nearing the end of our show today. Before we go off though, Bo, where can folks follow what you're doing? Is it just because I have is it just bopolny.com? Is that the best place?
My main website is gold, the beginning of the end. So that's year 2020. So gold 2020 forecast.com. And so that's probably my main webpage. And then you can also put my name in on YouTube, and my more recent videos pop up there as well. There you go. Okay.
So gold2020forecast.com. Thank you so much for coming on today. We'll have to do this again. I mean, I feel like I could probably talk for about 5 hours straight with you guys. So maybe we'll do some sort of Joe Rogan style long form one of these days. But again, thank you both very much.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Seth, for all you. God bless.